that you didn't have to love it, but you had to know whether you liked it or not. So that's what I think the volunteers offer us to do. So yes, that's my kiddos.
That's awesome. I didn't know any of that. So thank you for sharing, Karen.
Yes, yeah. No, you guys are good. Very, very good.
Perfect. So we will go ahead and get started.
Okay.
So hi to all of our volunteers. We're glad that you're able to join us today for our Lunch and Learn. Our guest today is Karen. She's a nursing practice leader in the Intensive and Specialty Division with the Department of Nursing. Karen has been with Uihc Healthcare for about 35 years and started as a staff nurse in the SNICU, later became assistant nurse manager and also staff volunteer supervisor. Karen has championed a lot of initiatives with funding for volunteer services. So she's going to talk about that in about the next 45 minutes. And then she's going to answer some questions that were submitted by you guys. But if you have questions during her presentation today, please feel free to send me those questions to the chat function in Zoom. So Karen, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you, Jillian. Thank you. And when I met with Jean and last week, and you guys talked about what it is that you want, one of the things that stuck in my mind about that meeting was, what is our impact? And I was able to go on this little journey in the last few days about what impact your volunteer funding has on the university. So this by all is not inclusive. There's definitely things I've missed. But I just have to tell you that it warms my heart and my soul to read the emails and read the stories that people were able to share with me in a short time. So I'm going to try this PowerPoint, and it's in no particular order of gratitude. So we'll just get started. Interrupt me at any time. Comments more than welcome. And just want to show you what you guys do for us. Okay. Let me see if I can switch to my, here we go. Oops. There we go. So the Learning at Lunch volunteer impact, the impact of your funding at UIHC.
So we can't actually see your screen, Karen.
Well, that's no good. Let me just a second end show and go back and see if it allows me to share. So I'm going to hit share screen again, and then I'm going to try here. How about now?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
There we go.
Okay, so now I'm going to switch again to the slide. Very good. Okay, so again, your volunteer impact. There we go. So Mindy sent me an email this morning with kind of what you helped her with at the volunteers. And at the end of it, she writes, "You are the reason we can do what we do." And that really sums it up. Okay, so this little guy here is one of the fuzzy animals that we have in our psych units. And when I reached out to Amy Milder, she was very grateful, and more money has been given to her, and they haven't spent that all yet this year, but she definitely wanted me to show the picture of the fuzzy animals that help calm some of their patients in the psych unit. Oops. There we go. This was a project that you guys are funding, the UIHC Donor Memorial Wall. So this one is from Sue Whitty, and this is a picture of the kiosk area, an interactive kiosk that they're planning to put on the first level. And in fact, it'll be on the first floor. And the whole idea is that this beautiful interactive kiosk will draw people in to look at the artwork. And then they'll be able to learn about donations and the impact of that. And then Sue was able to send me a picture around midnight on Friday that that piece of artwork just came in on Friday. So that will be coming, and that is very beautiful. Okay. The True Rise chairs I had to put in there because as I was walking around even yesterday, one of our patients was sitting in the True Rise chairs, and this was something that you funded for me a few years ago. The True Rise chair is special in that it goes all the way flat. So some of our visitors, families, when we had them, could sleep next to the bedside in this chair. And I remember one time we had a pregnant wife who was here to visit her husband, and she was able to sleep in that chair, and she was very grateful for it. We also had a patient who was bilateral legs that were amputated. And so we couldn't figure out how to get him into a chair, but this chair, the arms rise up. And so you can take the arms and put them back. And so he could use a slide board and slide from the bed to the chair and give him a sense of normalcy without his legs. So the patient who was in it yesterday, the nice thing about it, it's got the hand controls on the inside. And so the patients can lift their legs and lower and provide more lumbar support for their back without putting a call light on to ask the nurse to come do that. And then I don't know if you've been in our recliners where, you know, you just like the legs pop up and you kind of pop back. And if somebody has an excision, it's very painful. But these are very smooth, and so they raise the legs up and lower the back. And then they have an egress. So if a patient is trying to get to learn to stand and it's just too hard to go from a sitting to standing, this chair egresses so that it starts to rise so that the patient's legs can get underneath them, and then that helps them to stand. So it's been a very helpful chair helping many patients that I've worked with. The next one is our augmentative communication. And this one really has such a long history to it. And I think when I got the email that said, what is the one project, whether it be big or small, that had the biggest impact on me? And I thought about that over the weekend, and I really think my biggest impact was one of my first ones. And so this would have been way back, I don't know, I hate to even guess how many years ago it was. But the impactful patient truly was a young girl who had cancer in her brainstem. And the brainstem is so important because it connects our brain to our body. And I remember she had a 5-year-old daughter. And the deal about her is that she got radiation therapy in the brainstem. And so she recovered a little bit. She recovered and she left after the first surgery, but then she came back with this terrible, starting to get weak. And what happens in the brainstem is that she would lose certain motor functions. And so at first she was able to use her hands and use her fingers and use the call light. But as her radiation necrosis got worse, it started to take out the upper fibers, but her lower fibers would still work. And so with the help of the computer and the augmentative devices for call lights that the volunteers had funded for us, and with the help of Dr. Richard Hertig, we were able to continue to stay a step ahead of what she could physically do. And so I remember changing her devices, and we ended up, the last device was her feet. as she could hit the call light with her foot because her hands wouldn't work anymore. And we were able to have a awake meaning she was awake, but awake meaning that she was going to die. And I remember the neurosurgeons coming in and the nurses coming in and saying goodbye to her. So augmentative communication is just finding the right triggers for what works for a patient. And it can be really simple. So you guys have funded us these cards in the corner so the patient can point to them. And this boogie board where you can erase and you can see up there, sometimes people say, well, why can't they just write? Well, look at the scribbles that sometimes we get and we can't figure out what that is. And then all the way to the Noddle, which was a device that Dr. Hertig and the College of Business here was able to patent and to work and find the triggers to be able to connect that to a call light. So in September, we had a gentleman who was a spinal cord injured man, and he couldn't use his hands at all. And so it was the click like that would generate the call light. And so that was brought to us through the microphones that are attached to the Noddle. So it's kind of all full circle, starting way back with Dr. Hertig and trying to stay ahead of what this girl could function and how she could get to a call light, to being able to see where we're at now through all of your help. And so we might not use those computers that we used many, many years ago, but it all kept building upon itself to have the resources that we have. Comfort bags. So with the pandemic, heavens, we can't have families in here. And so it's very hard to see the patients just sit there and not have visitors. And so the comfort bag idea from Sherry is to be able to provide these to them. And again, very helpful, distraction, something fun, something mental stimulation that can help for those patients. So that's the comfort bag. And then this colorful box of toys, you might think. Now I want you to picture yourself in an ambulatory clinic. So these are going to 70 ambulatory clinics across the enterprise. So here on main campus and IRL. And Susie Hammer White is quickly, I think she was the first one to hurry up and fire a story to me within, honestly, minutes of asking how does the volunteers make a difference. And so the idea is that this would decrease needle sticks, the pain and discomfort by having fun distraction. And then it's gonna also be partnered with a huge education strategy to help the healthcare providers in the clinics realize what we can do to decrease that pain. And I think we've learned so much from our pediatric folks also what they do to help with that pain, but dang, the adults have the same kind of pain. And so it's really nice to be able to see this go across so many clinics to help with those needle stick. Yeah. Another project was the autism spectrum disorder patients. And again, for these patients that are getting venipuncture. And so you'll see the theme in this slide deck of trying to improve our venipuncture skills as well as distractions. And again, the volunteers, just think about all the people that get venipunctures and get IVs here and how much you've impacted so many patients. So the autism spectrum disorder, she didn't have a picture, so I just want you to picture this, but imagine that you're anxious, you're fidgety fingers. You're getting ready to have an IV put into you. And they have a little like moonlight there, and it's a little larger than a softball, and it's blue, and it's playing some soothing music off to the corner. And so you can focus on that light. Or they give you tactile toys, kind of things for anxious fingers to hold and manipulate. So again, those types of distraction that we can do to help these special patients. This is kind of a weird picture, but on the left here is a bin, and inside the bin is our weighted blankets. And so the volunteers funded weighted blankets for us. And gosh, there's so many stories that pop to my head. But I'm gonna tell the story of the MICU patient. And so a patient early in the pandemic was in MICU, and Sarah, the A&M there, was taking care of the patient, and the patient was, she wasn't going to be intubated. That wasn't her goal of care, but she needed a lot of oxygen, and it was just, her needs were getting more and more. And that morning, we were trying to figure out how to soothe her. And she was trying to pick at her oxygen, and we knew that her oxygen had to stay on her, and we didn't want to restrain her. And we had her family on the phone because, of course, they can't come to visit. And they were describing how this lady had baseline dementia, and so it's hard to reason with her. And they also told us that what she does to help calm herself down is to walk. Well, in COVID time, that was all shut down. There was no way we could get a patient up out of bed and walk. So we talked about different things. Is there music? Is there, would she like a weighted blanket? Would that soothe her? And they said, oh yes, we think the weighted blanket might help her. So we went and got a weighted blanket. And I remember Sarah putting it on her and her just kind of calming down. And sometimes the weighted blankets don't last for hours, but this other lady on 6 John Colleton recently, we put a weighted blanket on her, and it just sometimes provides just a few minutes or up to an hour of just that feeling of comfort and feeling of being hugged. So the weighted blankets have helped our peds and helped our adult patients through the years. So thank you. And then I didn't even realize the Patmobile was from the volunteers. So what did Robin said, about 80 patients a day are being serviced with the Patmobile, and saves many, 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 many miles of walking. And so thank you for all of that resources that you have been able to provide those visitors and patients going from their clinic visits. So that's a super duper one. This one is another one from MICU, and so it's their journals. And so there's another theme of journal therapy when we talk about volunteer funds. And they look almost like leather quality journals that we give to our patients that might just want to journal through this time. So thank you for those. Oops, there's my other page of the comfort. Couldn't find that one. These are whiteboards that MICU has. And it was interesting, on Friday, I was walking past and I was asking them how the volunteers have impacted them. And Sarah said, stop, Karen. And I said, what? And then she said, back up. And then look in here. And sure enough, in room 13 was a patient on a ventilator, and whose family had just come in, and so he was writing to her on your whiteboards, and so that's just easy to wipe off for those patients that can, and we don't have to worry about those papers anymore. And we can get nice thick markers so they can hang on to them better than a pen or a pencil. So that's the whiteboards. Our stroke support group, when I read that they were funded, and Emma and Kay, I don't know if you're on, but Emma and Kay are volunteers, and Aaron worked for a year trying to figure out how to get a stroke support group. And they worked hard on finding a venue, and the volunteers funded educational material and coffee for these meetings. And then COVID hit, and what are we going to do about the stroke support group? And so every month now, Erin works to run the support group virtually, and she has speech therapists and students join us in the stroke group. And so every month I learn from them. The occupational therapist that spoke last month was just so good. And the support group was a Zoom meeting, and one of the participants had her coat on, and she was staying for the last possible moment so she wouldn't miss anything, because she was a caregiver to her husband who was at outpatient rehab, and he had a stroke 7 months ago. And so the support that you see for these people helping each other to how they came back into function and come back into home is just so beautiful to watch the support of each other. And even though the volunteers didn't give money necessarily for this virtual stroke, this is another idea that I wanted to make sure that I emphasize, that sometimes you're the spark that gets something going. And I think on your applications, when you say, how are you going to sustain this? You help the writers figure out, like, how can this spark keep, how can you keep kindling this? And so the virtual way of doing this support group has been very nice, very good. Mary Beth shared this. And so Mary Beth, if you don't know her, Mary Beth Davis is so good with central lines and pediatrics, and she's going on to advance her schooling, but we lean on her a lot for trying to educate us on resources to decrease our central line infections. And so can you imagine bringing home a child with a central line and trying to figure out how to do that dressing change? So kids with central lines, sometimes need to do their dressings outside. So this money is able to get colored pictures, professionally bound spiral resource so that they can keep it for long term and share it with other providers that might be taking care of a central line for their child. So the Pediatric Central Line Education book is yet another example. This one was really cool also. So I didn't know this. So in comes a email from sports medicine, and I can't remember her name, I apologize. And she's talking about this M trigger. And so you guys were able to fund technology. So as I was reading about this over the weekend, that biofeedback, it seems like insurance doesn't pay for biofeedback as much anymore. And so it kind of lost its use in clinics, but the research is pretty amazing about how biofeedback can help patients recover to their regain pre-injury functionality. So it's a biofeedback unit that the patient can see. So let's say they asked you to move that right leg, but you can't visually see it move, but the electrodes would pick up that there's activity that's happening. And so they can set goals for the patient to do 10 reps maybe of just trying to get an electrical response. And you can see then how people would be motivated to keep working it if they can see progress, not in the movement, but neurologically getting that feedback. And then now that company has, they have a free app that the patients can use on their phones. And the tasks that are on these apps are to distract the injured person by focusing on the muscle, but actually the task. And so it's like they're skiing or doing different games, trying to help the shoulders or help the legs. So well done, volunteers, well done. This is a pack and play. And this picture doesn't come from the university. I took it off internet, but great story for the number of families that don't have a safe place to take their infant home to sleep safely. And so they do screening. Pam Hudorf and her team to identify the patients that would benefit from a pack and play as a safe alternative to sleep. So can you imagine the sense of relief that would be to parents as they're bringing their child home. So that is from you guys. And Brittany up here, she's so good. She's a vascular access for the pediatric team, and she has a team. And here's another example of the ultrasound for that venipuncture. And so when I'm in meetings with her, I'm at awe because she talks about these little neonate veins and trying to get the kiddos with access. And that was probably 2 years ago. And then when I got an email from her to say they have a 97% success rate, even on the small babies. And again, because of the technology that the volunteers were able to fund, to be able to see to see really good pictures of those really small vessels. So an ultrasound probe for the pediatrics has really impacted the pediatric patients. This is a kind of, it looks chaotic picture. This is Danilo back here on Four-Way Carver. So Danilo is a nurse that you might know, and he's a great nurse here. He's on my safe patient handling team. And the patient sometimes on Four-Way Carver is hooked up to a lot of devices. And that happens in a lot of units, but Danilo's really taken this to passion, and he wanted me to request funds from the volunteers so that when patients that were hooked to, like, there's a chest tube down here and there's a PCA pump here and there's the IV and it's getting a couple channels here, and he's got a feeding tube that's hooked to this feeding bag. So can you imagine getting this patient up out of bed with all of this equipment and going for a walk? Or what if this patient needed to go to the bathroom, right? And you have to bring all of these devices. So Stryker had come out with this IVEA. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's a stand to organize all of these devices. And so you guys funded us for that. And then also bioengineering downstairs here, biomed, Danilo designed this little stand on the bottom so that if the patient, see how he's on this chest tube, so when you disconnect him from the wall, you have to bring suction with you. So that just sits right down here. And then the patient, you just push it You can see the handlebars kind of right here. That's one handlebar, and there would be another handlebar here, but the patient's just sort of walking it, and then that's all in front of him. So increases our independence of our patients, provides them dignity, decreases a fall, makes a really challenging task of getting up to go to the bathroom not so challenging. So thank you for those stands. Sleep stacks are another thing that were funded recently. And so she said this is just starting to be implemented. But again, it would be the donation of sleep sacks for babies so that they can sleep safely. This is one of my favorite, and it's very old also, but you guys, when you funded this, you funded something that has stayed with us and never been able to have another alternative. So here's your PCA pump, right? And usually you have like a push button, almost like maybe a doorbell, kind of a text of a push to push in order for the patient to get that pain medicine delivered to them. Okay, so now with this device, again, that you funded for us, Dr. Hertig figured out a way to, we tried to work with a company, and they said there's not enough patients out there that would benefit. It wasn't to their financial benefit to develop another way to push a button. So Dr. Hertig designed it, again, biomedical team here built it. And then now the patient with just such a small touch is able to hit the button and deliver the pain meds. And the story I'm thinking of that comes to mind, there's again so many, but the burn patients with their fingers wrapped in gauze on both sides, they can just hit this button and not have to push that small button so that they can get their pain delivered to them. So again, less pain for our patients as a result of funding from the volunteers. The Discharge Lounge is a new funding from this past year. And so that, the Discharge Lounge, I'm just gonna pause for a minute. With the helicopter in the background. The Discharge Lounge has been an idea for a long time. I remember as we hit our level 5, where we don't have beds to admit into and patients can go home, but their rides aren't here. So the idea to have this Discharge Lounge, and so we want it to be a comfortable place where it doesn't feel like we're kicking out a patient, but that we want them to, their discharge criteria has been met. So they are able to safely leave an inpatient bed so that that bed can be available for somebody else. And so the Discharge Lounge, a temporary one, has been started in the last couple months. And now we've extended the hours even so that it can go longer, and they're evaluating that and learning from that. And that's all really, really good. So the Discharge Lounge that they're building is being partially funded with volunteer funds. So here's the cookies for the palliative care. So I was saying I gotten an email from the palliative care team and said, oh, definitely the volunteers making the cookies on for our palliative care team. And I read the email and I read it again, and I was like, really? They make cookies? And then the email said the volunteers bake them, and it provides this in-home-like smell and atmosphere. So for the visitors before COVID, and I believe it's since 2015. And so I ran over to Rescue to say, are you guys really making cookies up here that the volunteers gave? And Norma, who is excellent nurse, says absolutely before COVID. And she talked about how they started with baking some bread and that didn't really work so good. And then they have these cookies and then also potential cinnamon rolls. And they make it in an easy bake oven, make 6 of them, smells good. And these families that are at a very stressful point in their life, saying goodbye, are comforted with the cookies. Also, they have life journals. So the volunteers have donated life journals to patients so that they can write as they're facing the end of their life. Another venipuncture. So I told you about Brittany and the peds. Well, here's Nick and the adults. And so Nick and his team also have benefited from ultrasound to help the adult patients get their IVs in. And another really thing that I think is very notable is with the ultrasound, you can see where the tip of that needle is going. So as you're watching an ultrasound, you're seeing it go through the vessel. And so to keep the vessel walls not injured and to keep them healthy, so we call them like the healthy vessels. So it's not just getting the IV, it's to protect that patient's vessels for future IVs or lab sticks. And these patients that we see that have long-standing vascular access issues are benefiting so much from the ultrasounds, so that it's that first stick. And then what Nick has really championed is to have longer needle, longer IVs inside the vessel, because then they stay in the vessel longer and they can deliver the meds better so that we're not damaging our vessels from these small IVs. So another great thing. And then this is from Mindy, again, books and movies and games and all of those things that the library is able to share with us. And a COVID story is another lady that has dementia, no family here, had fallen at the outside nursing home, had a bleed in her brain. And so she comes to us on 6J and she's very out of sorts. Nothing is normal to her here, trying to help her. And one of the nurses, Rachel, she says, "Oh, let's try some music." And she says, we need to see if we can get music. And so she turns on her phone, and the first song that she plays is Johnny Cash, Ring of Fire. And so that wasn't quite the calming effect that we were looking for, but the patient liked it, but it wasn't all that calming. And then Rachel turned her phone to Jim Brinkman. And I didn't know who Jim Brinkman was, but the piano playing was amazing. And this lady just melted back into her chair. And so I said, but Rachel, you need your phone. And I said, I'm going to run to the library and see if they have it. So I ran up to the library and this volunteer is there. And I said, hey, do you have Jim Brinkman? And Mindy came over and they're showing me all of these videos. And I said, I really am not, this isn't my deal. Like, I don't know these artists, but I just know Jim Brinkman works. And so we looked and we couldn't find it. And we went to the checkout and I text Rachel. I said, I'm sorry, Rachel, I can't find Jim Brinkman. Do these names sound good? And she said, try harder for Jim Brinkman. And so the volunteers searched, and you know what? It was miscategorized, and the volunteers had funded for Jim Brinkman. We brought Jim Brinkman to 6th floor, and 2 hours later, the lady is still in her Q foam chair in the hall, relaxed and listening to Jim Brinkman. So the volunteers and the library help us. Many stories. So drop boxes, new chairs, all of those things. Diane just sent, this came just about 15 minutes before I came into this room, but the volunteers are funding the SimMan 3. So this is just came, she said, in late January, and they have him installed and will begin to work with the medical teams on these simulations. And when I quickly read about this, the beauty of this also is that it's videotaped. So we talk about debriefing. So after you do simulation, debriefing is really such an important part of the learning concept. And so this new SimMan has enhanced debriefing function, and you can videotape and you can get feedback for how good the compressions were, how much empathy you were giving, and all of those things. So very much will help our team with communication, as well as our patients as they are in their emergencies, that we're able to practice with the SimMan. So those are the things that were sent to me as a thank you. And over and over and over again, people were just so appreciative of the work that you guys do. So my heart and my soul were totally filled by being able to put this presentation together. So thanks for asking for it. And thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Karen, for sharing that. So we do have a couple of questions that were submitted. So how did the pandemic impact the needs of our patients? And how did that play a part in the funds, do you think, that were requested this last cycle?
So one of the things that I've requested, and I haven't implemented it yet, is the picture frame. So to answer your questions about how we've been impacted, I think the biggest thing by far is the families and the support and the loneliness and the tears and the crying and the fears that I see at the bedside with the patients. Just sat yesterday with a patient who just cried, and it, again, we don't have our volunteers to be able to come and sit with the patients, that human interaction, as well as trying to figure out how to bridge the needs of the patient. And so like the picture frames, hopefully families will be able to send pictures so that the patients can see them and bring back that emotional warmth that they get from pictures. So the distractions, you could see how the distractions kind of theme was in there. Yeah.
We're going to switch gears just a little bit. What was your career path like? I know you didn't really talk about it much, but could you just kind of walk us through it, and how did you choose the field that you're in? And really, what does it mean to be a nursing practice leader here?
Oh, well, let me see. I was gonna be a math major. I loved math and went to Iowa State wasn't quite sure what I was gonna do, but it was math. And sat up in the library studying trigonometry and, calculus, all those really important things, right? And a gentleman, I heard some noise, and a gentleman was seizing, and he was hitting books, and they were falling on him, and he had bit his lip, and he was bleeding, and nobody was on the upper floor of the library because I studied in quiet, and I was calling for help and didn't know what to do. It was an awful experience. The bad thing was, about a month prior to that, I was sitting in a really big hall, psychology class, and the girl sitting next to me dropped her book, and when I leaned down to pick it up and looked at her her eyes were in the back of her head and she was starting to fall out of the chair, and she was seizing. And there was 300 whatever people in this big room, but I still remember the lecturer just kept talking and talking, and it was just not happening. People weren't seeing it. And so both of those things of being in a group with that many people and not knowing what to do, and then to be by myself with this person. And so I remember leaving the library and saying, adios math. I'm gonna, figure out how I can know what to do. And so that's when we, switched to nursing. And then I started out in the SICU, and the hardest times of my life, because you were just at the bedside with people in their darkest moments. And so the beauty of that part of the journey was that you were able to experience those feelings and be able to understand what the human spirit is really capable of. But it wasn't your family, and it wasn't your loved one. And so honestly, I just got another Christmas card from one of the family members, and it starts out with 21 years ago. And so I was able to really learn from other people. And one family member told me when I was young that there's no such thing as a nurse having a bad day, because it's always worse on the other side. And that is such a good perspective. And so even when COVID was happening, and my young nursing residents just had those eyes, you just say, no, you have to be strong. It's harder on the other side. You can go home, even though it's hard. These patients can't. So what can we do to support you? What can we do so that you can help? And so it's hard when there's not family there, and the new nurses not knowing how to talk to families or to patients, and we're masked, and the fear honestly in March and April of giving a patient COVID. So it was like, if a family member can't come to visit them, why should I be there? Like, what am I going to do? Like, the nurses need to be there, the doctors need to be there, but it was all about limiting the number of people. So I would honestly I know that's what I started to say, a year ago today was my last naive day of just giggling. And then I honestly know that I cried every day. Mm-hmm. So nursing practice leader is somebody who at our institution here is able to make sure that the practices at the bedside meet evidence-based practice. Their nurses are able to understand, have the knowledge, so I can teach, that we get consulted on patients that have special needs. We work with teams, so safe patient handling has been a project since 2002 to try to bring what it is that those patients need and those nurses need to the bedside. So it's really good, because I'm not, it's just great. Every day I love coming to work, and worried about the minutes that I waste not helping or moving this place forward. Yeah, that's good.
So you're clearly passionate about what you do, but where does all that passion come from? What drives you?
I don't know, honestly, but I will tell you, I was talking to my mom yesterday. I'm like, I have to do this volunteer thing, Mom, and I have to do this presentation, and you were always the Tuesday lady. Like, when we grew up, she was always the Tuesday lady. Like Beth Jean, she was Tuesday. And even when my kids were small, I knew I couldn't ask her on Tuesdays to help my kids, because we didn't want to mess up her volunteer days. And I said, and my mom has really, really bad short-term memory right now. And she she's magical right now. We'll just say that. And I said, Mom, what word is it? Like, what is it about volunteering? And she said, Karen, it's just so fulfilling. It's so fulfilling. And even now, when she talks about it, she has that joy inside of her of that fulfillment of helping other people. And it's so ingrained in her. And I just hope that that helps me throughout my life. Life is hard, but you learn the human spirit is very, very strong. And people are so good. And I get paid for it.
So, I mean, that was really all I had, unless you want to share anything else with our group today, Karen.
I met Jean. I had to go into the family lounge on Friday and just sit in a chair and look around, like, again, trying to find the impact of the volunteers. And I took down the 2020 calendar off the wall, which is testament to time, you know, and just all the years that I learned from the volunteers through that waiting room and all. And you sit and look at the different chairs that people sat in and the lounge chairs that you guys bought us. And it's pretty amazing.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for offering such a unique perspective on how our volunteers make an impact with funding and what they do here, and just the process improvement with our patients and their families here at UI Healthcare. I know this has been something a lot of our volunteers have been curious about. So,
We miss you.
Yes, we definitely do. So Karen, thank you for taking the time to be a part of our Lunch and Learn today. And
thank you for the opportunity. Again, it was very healing, for me also.
And we hope all of you enjoyed our event today. And in a little bit, you'll receive just a short 2-minute survey on what you thought of our Lunch and Learn today and any suggestions you may have. Your feedback is important. Clearly, we got a lot of requests for, how does our funding impact things at the hospital? So we couldn't think of anyone better than you, Karen, to talk to us.
Well, it's good. Good. Never doubt. Like I say, don't waste any energy worrying about the fact that you're not making a difference, because no energy to lose there.
So thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today, and take care.
All right.